There's a lot of team compositions you can make in Genshin Impact, and these are the 5 most popular teams right now that are all based on the latest 2.0 community data from the Spiral Abyss. You know a character is good when in just a few weeks after getting released, they're already found in the most popular teams. And while you could argue this has to do with the fact a lot of players have been waiting for Ayaka's release, the reality is she's just a really strong character that can blast your enemies away with her insane burst. And sure, while she does have an expensive burst that needs to be attended by either a cryo battery teammate like Diona or getting lucky with some extra energy recharge from the substats, there's still a lot you can work with even if the burst isn't ready, although it is something that makes up the majority of her damage output. Now, for the compositions, an often used variation includes a spin-off from the powerful Morgana team, where she replaces Ganyu's position, and then either Venti or Kazuha is used for grouping enemies, and decreasing their resistance with Viridescent artifacts set, as well as Mona, who acts as a general-purpose support, in addition to enabling freeze reactions. But there's also a slightly different variation which includes Diona, Xingqiu, and Sucrose, as a more of a budget option for freezing your enemies, although the more common choice remains Kazuha for the animal position, even if he can break free frozen enemies with his plunge attacks. Still, aside from some of the team building caveats, it's quite interesting to see what sort of equipment the majority of players are using from the community data, and for Ayaka, it comes off with quite a surprise that Amanoma Kageuchi, the new craftable 4-star weapon from Inazuma, is sharing the spot between the Black Sword and Blackleaf Longsword, which suggests that critical rate and damage isn't the only substat with high demand, because while the new craftable weapon provides the less desirable attack percentage, the passive itself, especially once fully refined, makes it into a beastly weapon when it comes to energy generation. But aside from this, a lot of players seem to have unlocked Mistsplitter as well. Now as for the artifacts, full set of Blizzard Strayer remains as the top choice, while those who haven't gotten good pieces tend to stick with a double 2 set of Gladiators and Blizzard Strayer instead. And as for the remaining teammates, Diona's weapon of choice is Sacrificial Bow, due to how efficient it is when it comes to cryoparticle generation, but more interesting part would be the majority of players using Maiden's Beloved full set that gives a better kick to her healing capabilities. Also, for the Lazy Bard, Stringless and Favonius Bow are tied very close to each other as his weapon of choice, while Kazuha seems to have a thing for Iron Sting, and for a good reason too. This weapon previously wasn't really getting the attention it wanted to, but after the Samurai Boy showed up, it's basically the next best thing besides the Freedom Sworn 5-star weapon. Oh, and it comes off with no surprise that no matter what the animal character is, Viridescent Venereer full set is the most dominant choice you'll see. Finally, for our Hydro friends, Xingqiu remains closely knit with his Sacrificial Sword, although time will tell if the newest emblem of Severed Fate and combination of Favoni's sword might shift the need for this weapon, at least for those who still haven't got it, and for Mona, it's either Witsith or Thrilling Tales to boost up her teammates. And yes, that also means she's the one carrying full Noblesse set on her, while the majority of book nerd builds tend to go for a double 2 set of Heart of Depth and Noblesse instead. So hopefully this sheds some light how the actual players tend to build teams at Ayaka for Spiral Abyss, and while you might see someone comparing her to Ganyu, we sometimes tend to forget that people are just happy to have another strong cryo character, and it just shows how quickly she grew on the players. Here's a team that's been getting more attention than usual, thanks to several interesting turn of events. First of all, when we talk about popular teams, there's the assumption that the data comes from the Spiral Abyss usage, and while it's easier to imagine teams acting independently, fact of the matter is, you need to bring 2 of them. So even if we wish we could sprinkle those Bennetts and Xingqius into every team, there's only one of each. Which is why after Kazuha came out, a big surge of players decided to shift their attention towards Childe's Vaporized team comp, which capitalizes on extremely powerful duo of Bennett and Xiangling, but more importantly, because this team doesn't need Zhongli, Venti, or Xingqiu, not to mention other high priority characters, it just naturally built itself as the next dominant team you'll see a lot of players using. Now granted, this isn't some shocking revelation, in fact, the past video of popular teams also included it in the list, although at the time it was almost bottom of the 5 and Sucrose was also sometimes used, but after the Samurai Boy came out, and especially now in the newest Abyss rotation, where you have that annoying Pyrohypostasis, the usage rate is extremely high. And one thing that's easy to forget is that Childe isn't the main damage dealer here. In fact, it's Xiangling who triggers Vaporized Pyronado so often, since there's just so much hydro application Childe provides, which means they both work in a beautiful conjoined effort, while you have Benny Boy and Kazuha providing some insane support capabilities by shredding enemies' resistance, boosting elemental damage and attack, as well as crowd controlling and healing the team. Basically, it's a work of art when you can pull off all the bursts in a quick succession. composition. And for the most common equipment choices, Tartaglia users really love the Skyward Harp, while Rust remains as the second most often picked weapon, but there's also Viridescent Bow some opt in to use. Also, to no surprise, Heart of Death full artifact set is what the most players are using. As for the partner in crime, Xiangling gets criticized a lot for her lack of energy generation and big burst cost, so the top two most popular weapons to address this issue are either Favonius Lance or Skyward Spine, but there's also Dragon's Bane for those big vaporizes and Deathmatch for more consistent critical hits, although you really need to be sure you can solve that energy problem before picking these weapons for her. And of course, Crimson Witch 4-piece artifact set as well as a 2-set combination with Noblesse are to be found on a lot of these chefs, but since Emblem of Severed Fate is a thing now, it's quite possible this will change in the future if players decide to equip her with this new set. Finally, for the remaining two friends, Benny Boy likes to run around with any energy recharge sword and rocking a full set of Noblesse, while Kazuha still pretty much looks the same from previous teams showcased. So in essence, it's great to see Childe's devastating power, even as someone who owns him at 0 constellations and a pretty decent Xiangling, because the amount of damage this duo is able to put out thanks to Benny and Kazuha is pretty amazing to say the least. Ever since Hu Tao showed up, she's been closely tied together with Zhongli and Xingqiu, who have been responsible for bringing out the best of her capabilities. Interestingly enough, a very popular variation to this already powerful core team foundation got enhanced with Venti, which essentially makes this into a double Archon team, and while previously it had multiple variations like Albedo, Sucrose, and even Bennett, Venti seems to have been the most common teammate filling the last spot in the comp. Now for the Funeral Director, Staff of Homa shows up quite often as the weapon of choice, which shouldn't be too surprising since it was one of the most profitable weapon banners in Genshin's history, but a good number of people also use Dragon's Bane as well. Artifacts are pretty standard, a 4-piece set of Crimson Witch, and sometimes it's a 2-piece set combined together with Wanderers. But at least for Zhongli, things look more free-to-play friendly because Black Tassel still makes up the majority of weapon picks, while the Tenacity of Millilith 4-piece set sits at a high usage rate, but quite a few also choose to use double 2 sets of Noblesse and Archaic Petra for those extra painful boulders. As for the rest, well, it's pretty much what you saw previously. Thing is, Walnut team variations have existed since 1.3 update, but now that Venti is looking to be the most common teammate, it's just interesting to see the power of double Archon utilized by someone who is mostly focused on charged attacks. You can't have a video discussing teams without Xiao somewhere in it. At this point, we all know that some characters just receive a lot more attention than others, but what's interesting about our sweet Xiao is that the best teams, or in this case, most popular ones, are the ones that basically utilize the power of Geo and Animo. And that's why nothing much has changed about this common composition. It's usually Xiao, Jean, Albedo, and Zhongli, although sometimes you will see a more free-to-play friendly variation of Sucrose and Ningguang taking up the spots, but for the most part, it's just a consistent team you can rely on when other compositions don't require Geo Archon's handholding. And Xiao himself usually comes with a Primordial Jade Wing Spear as most often picked weapon, while Deathmatch stays as a close second, and a massive preference is given to a double 2-set bonuses of Gladiators and Viridescent to squeeze out bigger numbers. As for the rest, Albedo players almost exclusively use a fully refined Harbinger of Dawn, and either a hybrid mix or a full set of Archaic Petra, while Jean relies on Energy Recharge or Aquila Favonia with the same artifact set as Xiao. So yeah, this is a short insight of an already well-established team that didn't see too many changes and variations, and remains to this day as a pretty popular choice for many players. Before we move on to the last team, it's important to acknowledge a composition which is pretty close to the other 5 most popular ones, and while it doesn't fall behind that much, it still ends up as more of an honorary mention for this video. Now, this would be Eula teams with the most popular variation that includes Diona, Fischl, and Zhongli, which all work in harmony to provide the best environment for her massive burst damage. There have been also sightings of Bennett acting as a replacement for Diona, but you'd have to be pretty confident in Eula's energy generation to keep the burst ready when the cooldown is off, so it's most likely builds that contain some energy recharge in her artifact substats. And as for her Tango Dancing Enthusiast, Wolf's Gravestone and Song of Broken Pines are the top 2 choices when it comes to usage data, but there's also Serpent Spine and surprisingly, even Skyward Pride as the 4th popular choice, which probably explains why we're seeing Benny Boy instead of Diona in some of those compositions. Finally, for the artifact sets, you've got 4-piece Pale Flame as the choice of the majority, while behind behind it sits the double 2 set of Bloodstain and Pale Flame for that sweet 50% physical damage increase. On the other hand, Fischl players love to use Stringless and either a mixed set of Gladiators and Thundering Fury, but there's also a good majority of her builds containing the Tenacity of Byleth 4-piece set for those easy buff activations from Oz. Hopefully, with new Electro characters coming out in Inazuma, Eula's popularity will surge even higher than it is already. Look, it's no secret this team was going to end up on the list just because of how utterly broken it is. So even with the newest 2.0 content and updated Spiral Abyss, it still remains as the most popular team used by veterans in Wales throughout the submitted community data. Now, this doesn't mean there haven't been different variations popping up in the data samples, and one of them, with no shocking surprise, contains Kazuha replacement for Venti, and if you've been watching the video closely, it's already clear this samurai basically works with any team, and for Morgana, a variation that includes him focuses more on single target damage due to how much weaker he is at grouping enemies, but in exchange get neat little boosts like increasing team's elemental damage from his passive. And as previously shown, there is a somewhat inspired variation of Ayaka and Kazuha that replace Ganyu and Venti, but the end result is a much more close quarters focused team due to how you need to position the bursts, and in the literal fact you're now using swords instead of bow users as half of your team. Finally, if you're wondering about the equipment, then it's pretty much the same what you saw previously for Diona, Venti, and Mona, while Amos' bow and prototype Crescent is what most Ganyu players use, along with either a full Wanderers or Blizzard Strayers set. But that's pretty much it, and only time will tell when will the players start disassembling this powerful team comp and assigning core members to different builds, as we are already seeing some variations showing up that can replace some of these characters. It's important to remember the teams you just saw have a lot of different variations to them, not to mention it's just the top 5 that surfaced from the gathered data of the global community players. And there's a lot of proof out there, for example, where Barbara usage rate becomes high because of pyrohypostasis, or national teams still dominating as the top choice for free-to-play players. So at the end of the day, it's simply a showcase of what's popular right now, while the most crucial thing is to first enjoy your own characters before trying to chase the so-called meta build. Still, we can also gain an insight into things like how popular Kazuha actually is, and how prevalent Ayaka became just after getting released, so at least we can keep tabs on what's really working for everyone when it comes to the most challenging content in the game. But if you want to see future videos that discuss these teams individually with more details, be sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel by hitting the bell notification. As always, thanks for watching till the end, and see you next time.